In our last video, I asked and answered the question, what is the tithe? What was the purpose of it? Why did God institute it in the first place? Well, in this video, I want to ask and answer the question, did the new covenant make the law or the principle of the tithe old? Or in other words, did the new covenant do away with the tithe? Answering this question requires what we call systematic theology. It requires a comprehensive study and understanding of the scriptures. And the reason for this is because there's nowhere in the Gospels or in the New Testament where Jesus gave a pointed answer to this. Jesus never said, hey, that tithe, that's irrelevant, stop doing that. On the other hand, he never said, you need to keep tithing. That said, we have several instances where Jesus said and did things, and throughout the New Testament, different events and or commands that are given that help us have an understanding of why we're still to tithe. So let's look at the principle that Jesus gave for our interpretation and standard of the law. And to do this, we go to what we call the Sermon on the Mount. You're familiar with the Sermon on the Mount. In it, Jesus takes different points of the law. For instance, he says to the disciples that day, you've heard it said, do not commit murder. Well, I tell you, don't even harbor anger in your heart against your brother. You've heard it said, do not commit adultery. Well, I tell you, do not even lust after someone else. So what Jesus does throughout the Sermon on the Mount is he says, you've heard this in the law. Well, not only did I not come to do away with it, I came to fulfill it. I came to say, let's take it up a level. When we see Jesus and the disciples witness the widow coming into the temple to give her offering, you notice Jesus doesn't tell the disciples, she doesn't need to do that anymore. Jesus honors this woman because she's coming in obedience to bring her gift. Jesus doesn't say she doesn't need to bring it. In fact, this woman, Jesus tells us, she very, very likely gave all that she had. So not only did the new covenant not do away with the tithe, the new covenant actually took the tithe and showed us that tithing is essentially training wheels. Now, let me be clear. Tithing is obedience. When you tithe, you shouldn't look at it as something inferior. But God not only established the tithe to teach his people stewardship, God established the tithe to teach his people generosity. He put the tithe in place to be like the bottom line, the foundation. It's the thing that you and I build upon so that we begin to practice in our lives holding on very, very loosely to the things of this world. So the answer to the question is no. The new covenant did not do away with the tithe. In fact, Jesus took the principle and the law and he almost like tied it to a rocket. He said, you've heard it said, well now I tell you this. So as Christians, as members of the body of Christ, we're not only called to tithe, we're called to prayerfully and carefully examine what we give and how we give it. And so in the next video, I want to talk about what it means as a Christian to give faithfully, cheerfully, and sacrificially.